Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to the official OP Poker channel. We're about to kick off another live play session, this time playing the $25 spin and goes. But before that, I'd like to announce that we're about to release that new course update that you guys have been waiting for. That's tomorrow, which is the 24th of July, 2020. This new module will be in addition to the existing low stakes spin and go course, and it's basically just going to expand on what's already there with a special focus on shorter stack play and also a couple topics that have come up when people have asked for them in our Discord channel and our community at large. So let me read you the description from the website. It says, this course module update includes 6 new charts, 3 videos on chart composition, 3 videos on range adjustment / exploits for common player types, 1 video on strategies versus in any 2 card opponents, 1 video on Nash equilibrium and practical application versus opponent types, which is a total of 1 hour 40 minutes plus of additional video content, as well as those new and improved ranges. So if you guys will take a look, I'm going to put some links down in the bio below if you'd like to go and explore the course a little bit more and see if it's right for you. But with no further ado, let's jump into our games. All right, guys, so let's jump into our first game now. We are playing the $25 stakes. If you guys haven't seen how these work, normally what we're going to do is we're going to play a handful of games. We're going to see how we get on. We're going to talk some strategy along the way. Hopefully we'll have some cool spots that we can talk about as we go. So jumping into our first game now, guys, it is a 2x multiplier. We wake up with queens in the big blinds. I'm actually going to switch out of chips to big blinds. I prefer to play in chips wherever possible because I feel like sometimes you do get a little bit more information by seeing the specific chip amounts that people use rather than just the straight big blinds. Small 3-bet here with queens. This might be a little bit unbalanced on my part. I'm honestly not completely certain of what other hands I'm going to use to balance that specific range. Something that I probably need to look at more in the future because if we are going to have non-all-in 3-bets in that situation, we got to make sure that we're doing it with some weaker stuff as well. It does look crazy strong, so I don't think it would be difficult to actually pick a couple of hands to include in that specific range. But it might be somewhat unconventional. It's not a spot that I've actually looked at a ton. For the most part, we're going to end up flatting a lot when they open to 3x in that situation just because we want to play from in position as often as we can in those spots. But we do make the raise. It does look pretty strong. We get the folds. Is there ever any room, to flat with queens there? I think at the deeper stack depths when we're 25 or whatever, that can be a little bit dangerous. The deeper you are, the more implied value that your opponent has when they outflop you. As we start to get shallower, I think in position you can afford to flat a lot more liberally with some of your premiums to try and extract additional value where you're not going to lose as many chips, as much value when they do manage to get lucky on the flop or whatever. So, Gregory, how do you feel? Okay, we're going to go ahead and flat here. We do actually see a pretty decent flop. Ace high will be the best hand here quite frequently. We also end up having the gut shot as well. He decides to check. I think this is fine just for us to bet. We do get check raise here once in a while, but for the most part when people check, it's because they actually have a similar hand to us. Some kind of a high card combo that they don't want to give up. And then this actually turns out to be kind of an awkward turn if that's the case, but we'll see how it goes. This is actually kind of a nice spot to check behind as well, because if he does float here with a hand like King Queen, which has a similar sort of high card value to the ace, we can convince them to turn that ace into a bluff once in a while if they think they're going to get us to fold a 6 or a 5. We also protect in the situations where our opponents does actually have a larger ace than us, but we're not that concerned about that generally. I'm going to use a larger size because it looks more bluff heavy. Sometimes we do get a hero call here from a hand like King 5 or something like that. Nice. Let's take a look at what he had really quick. Turns up here with King 10 exactly. So yeah, we let him catch up there. Our initial read is actually pretty on point, right? We're actually hoping that he does have a hand like King X when he floats, especially when we pick up the ace on the turn. Because as I said, we're going to get him to bluff every once in a while too once we slow down in that position. So I think we're going to shove here. 14. It's about 13 big blinds effective, a6 suited. Definitely going to be a winning shove, as in it's going to show up profits. No doubt about that. And we do take it down. Very nice. I'm just wondering, I don't remember exactly where the cutoff is where we want to min raise and then go broke with some of those hands, for example. I think at that effective stack depth, the majority of our suited aces are going to go in apart from maybe like ace queen or ace king, something like that. Ace queen ace king or ace queen suited. Okay, so the heads up now. We're actually pretty shallow. This is the 2x multiplier that does have the slightly faster clocks. So it does get up there pretty quickly. I think that call with king jack, by the way, is totally appropriate. We're absolutely going to be shoving a wide enough range for king jack to be the best hand enough to make that a profitable call as well. Cool, taking it down. Pretty straightforward. We don't really have a hand on that flop, so we're going to go ahead and take a shot at it. Okay, limp at 7 big blinds effective. That is somewhat fishy. A lot of people... We actually have a limping range at 7 big blinds effective, but a lot of people won't. At the 25s, we will expect to run into a few regs, though, so that we're not really sure about this player specifically. Pocket 5s is a hand that we can still be limping at 8 big blinds effective. We are calling a shove if he decides to put it in. Or we'll just flop a set. Easy game. I think this board is dry enough for us to want to check here. I don't think it's particularly unbalanced. If we did trap here with like an ace of some variety, we do some of the time here with a very small number of our aces. We are going to check behind to prevent from him check jamming in our face. So by checking, we give him an opportunity to start bluffing or even value betting if he does put us on ace high or something like that. This is kind of a gross run out. I don't think we can fold if he shoves, but we will run into the 6 once in a while here, especially as it's a limped pot. Sometimes you might even have 9-10, something like that too, but we're not folding a set at this point, especially not for the game. Cool. So I think we definitely have the best hand now. It'd be pretty weird for them not to shove us straight in this situation, but I think this is the size we want to use. Nice. Get him all the way down to 98 chips, which is less than 3 bigs. King 3 of spades, definitely calling a shove. No doubt about it. Never ever folding this against any player type. Easy call. Can we lock down game 1? Nice one. All right, cool. First game under our belt. Very nice. So that's $25 in the prof right now. Let's go ahead and register for another game. Oops, sorry guys. Catch the multiplier here. Cool, another 2x. All good. Pretty smooth game though. Nothing too interesting to talk about there. Cool, king jack now. Let's go ahead and I think we can, we're definitely starting, I can't remember what the range is here. I think we're still limping this one. Again, moving into chips here. Much prefer playing in chips than in big blinds. If I remember correctly, king jack is a limp, and then obviously we're going to call a raise. But it's one of those hands that just has really good playability. We definitely don't want to min raise this, or sorry, raise this to 3x, for example. At this size would be the correct sizing. Oh, getting recognized over here. We're definitely not folding king high on that kind of a texture ever. At least not to the first bet. Our hand is so strong on this flop texture. Good luck, good luck. He's asking for the all-in next hand. Cool, and on the river, I think king high is going to win here pretty often. I think if he was the kind of person to bet a 10, it would be pretty weird for him not to go ahead and bet it on the turn. So if he bets, we're going to call king high wins. Yep, well played us. Nice little spots. Queen 8 suited will play in position for sure. And we're never folding for the min 3-bet here. We have a beautiful hand that plays really well post flop. When people 3-bet to this size, we're absolutely never going to fold for that sizing. It's just giving us infinite, like any hand that we raise there. We could open 7 deuce off. We wouldn't actually open 7 deuce off, but if we did, we wouldn't mind calling the absolute min. I think I'm going to check here. We do have a nice draw, but I don't want to bet and let him shove on us. And I think this is a spot where if you do have an overpair, like kings or queens or something like that, I think it becomes really easy for you to go ahead and do that. The fact that he checks the turn is a little bit weird. I think I am going to go ahead and start betting now. I don't think he would check back an ace here too often on the turn. Cool. So we did avoid it on the flop at the very least. So he check traps us on the turn. We can't call. Fair play, well played. But definitely a really, really unusual line, and I think there is a really good chance that we avoided the inevitable on the flop there, which is pretty interesting. Ace eight, he says. All right, cool. Which is why, okay, that would make sense, because that's why on the flop they check with the intention of check shoving, and then on the turn they just want to protect their ace. But the reason that why they didn't lead the ace in this case would have been because they had the straight, assuming that they're telling the truth, of course. But I'm happy with our line because it means that we actually do realize a little bit more equity than if we had just gone ahead and bet flop, in which case we do probably just end up getting shoved on a lot of the time. Okay. In these 2x multipliers, I think it's definitely worth noting that playing faster is usually better. So for example, I think just shoving king 6 here by default is really good, even if we don't really know the player that well. Running into jacks, no big deal. Looking for a king to improve. But in these situations, this is kind of exactly my point. When the blinds are going up so quickly, I do think it's really important. That we take pretty much every edge that we can get. They're all chatting. Let's go. Nice game. These guys don't understand push-fold ranges, obviously. Fair play. But in the 2x multipliers, I think it's important that we take some of our shallower or our narrower edges, and we know that shoving king 6 there is actually going to perform fine when we're out of position and we're under 14 big blinds effective, where we can be shoving it for closer to 15 according to Nash. All right, so we have this guy marked as a probable reg, so we're not going to get too out of line in position here. Okay, sorry, back into chips, guys. Okay, check calls. We can still have the best hand here when we get check called. I think this could be a high card once in a while. For example, ace deuce. Cool, ace 9, we're going to shove by default here. Especially if our opponent is a reg, this should do really well against his opening range, which would be a lot wider than the average recreational. Cool, 9-4 suited, a little bit too wide. It is really interesting to see people comment on plays like that when I'm shoving king 6. The shock on those players' faces is really interesting. It's also very gratifying as well because, or the shock in the chat bar, I guess, not on their faces. It's also really gratifying as well because it shows you that there's clearly like a very large gap in understanding between the average player, even at the $25 stakes, and the kind of where we are at with our game as well. We know that shoving king 6 there is going to do totally fine. We're adjusting for the fact that it's a 2x multiplier because we know the blinds are going to go up faster, so we don't want to miss out on those opportunities unless we have a lot of really good notes on an opponent. And both players are just completely shocked that I'm shoving 14 big blinds effective or 13.5 big blinds effective with king 6. And that's really good for us because long term, it's those kinds of lines that are gonna be really successful, or those kinds of adjustments that will make us more successful than our opponents. Nice, we got aces doubling through the king 10. If we're playing against unknown opponents and we're playing some of the deeper stack depths with the slower clocks, I don't mind just turning that hand to a min raise as opposed to a shove. But I've seen a lot of good come out of that adjustment when we're playing the faster spins. And that's also something that I speak about a little bit in the course as well. If you guys do want to play spin and go flash, I think that's also true, if not more true, than the normal speed spin and goes, even with the faster clocks. Cool. Against the reg, there is a chance that maybe we just want to be taking out our absolute trash. 5 deuce off is probably a little bit wide to be limping against a reg, but against unknown recreationals who are more passive, you can basically limp 100% of the hands that you'd otherwise fold. And you'll do just fine, just maximizing your exposure to situations where you're in position. I'm going to float here against the reg. I think this is a really interesting spot because he's going to be forced to fold pretty much every turn if he doesn't actually have a piece. I don't think we've played enough for him to know that I would float here with basically no hand. So I'm really interested to see what he decides to do on the turn. Okay, so the question is, do I actually raise the turn? If our intention is to float on the flop because we think we're going to keep him honest on the turn, I think it's fine for us to give up on the turn when he continues. Like I said, I don't think we have that much of a dynamic between us yet for him to just have like a double barrel complete bluff. Although, you know, he might be good enough to actually have that as well. Okay, let's bet the flop here. Cool, taking that one down. That's pretty much what you want to see with that hand, right? Cool, versus the limp, we're going to shove. Now, we need to bear in mind, I mean, this is always going to be our shove by default, especially against a reg, who is going to limp here with a nice wide range. We need to be aware that regs will have more traps in these situations, so as we get shallower, they will limp and call with some hands that will have us beat, but they'll also limp and call with hands like King Jack as well, which makes perfect sense. This is kind of what I was trying to allude to before the action went down. Reg v reg play is very different in these situations because your opponent is going to limp a range that they will intend to call off with. Against us specifically, the limp call with King Jack there is actually very strong because we're going to be shoving hands like 5-6 suited, 7-8 suited, a lot of those cool suited connectors that we use as pre-flop all-ins. When we're in position late game, we can also use them as shoves at some of the deeper stack depths once our opponents have limped. His limp call with King Jack there is actually very good against us. You wouldn't want to be making that kind of a play against unknowns necessarily because they're probably going to be shoving a little bit too strong to make that like a real slam dunk. But that's another win, guys. Let's try and get into another game now. Let me do this. Let me try and do this the right way. We keep stacking tables here on accident. There we go. All right, let's make it a big one. A lot more interesting play in that specific game. But reg v reg, I mean, we're just going to shove ace deuce by default. The cool thing about shoving reg v reg is that there's actually an opportunity. Let me resize this table quick, guys. There's actually a good opportunity to get called by worse when you're actually playing against regs there. Whereas for the most part, when we do that against the recreational, they're just going to limp fold, and that we're going to take down the chips, which is a very considerable number of chips in relation to the amount that we risk. Can't fold the flop. We have a pair. The fact that our opponent used such a small size on the flop is a little bit concerning because it does feel like they're trying to like get some more value from us. Sorry about the motorcycles, guys. I guess we're going to give up on the turn. I guess we're calling the flop just to improve, basically. There are some situations where people just bet small and then give up, but it's a little bit on the rare side. Usually when people size their bets like that, it's because they have a plan for later streets. So how many have we played so far, guys? We've played 3-1-2, or have we played 4-1-3? I can't remember. So we raised and they called, and then we've checked back on the flop where we have the gutter and the ace high. Pretty easy call on the turn, of course. We're not slowing down on the flop so we can give up on the board pairs. And again, it's just not folding here, to be honest. I'm expecting him to have a pair once in a while, but for that size, we're just going to have the best hand way too often when the board pairs like that. Jack 4, no thanks. That's an easy fold on the button there. Cool, and now this is an easy call. We're under 10 big blinds effective. King Queen is way too strong to let go at this point in the game. We do actually have King 10 dominated, so nice little adjustment there for the ranges. We ended up chopping it, unfortunately, but we do get the money in really good, and that was definitely our way back in the game right there. How do I feel about his shove? I think the shove there is fine. We were about, he had 14 big blinds at the time, or maybe a little bit more. I think shoving King 10 at that point is probably what you want to be doing a lot of the time. If you're playing closer to a GTO strategy, I think probably you'd want to min-raise King 10 as opposed to shove it, and you'd probably want to be shoving more like King Jack off at 14 big blinds effective. But as long as we're adjusting correctly, that's great. Just a little bit unlucky in the all-in situation there. Okay, 8-6, probably not a hand we're going to be able to play. If we're playing any decent players, we just get absolutely run down in these situations now as well because we need to find a hand to double through. The King-Queen was actually a really critical moment for us there. 9-5 isn't quite good enough to shove. We're getting to the point where we can shove extremely wide though. And I think for 5 big blinds effective, we have to put 9-7 in the middle from position. I think it's right on the cusp of what you would do in terms of Nash. But like I said, in these games, we can't mess around. We need to take pretty much every spot where we know it's going to be okay. Same reason that why we shoved King 6 in that previous game in the 2x multiplier. At this point, I don't think we can afford to fold Queen 10. The fact that we see a min raise at the stack depth, though, is really unusual. Again, this is a faster game. I think we're going to punt it here, but I don't like that they've min raised off of the stack depth. It does feel a little bit stronger than we'd like. I think Queen 10 probably has enough equity to go broke here, though. Okay, that's fine. The initial shove is good, though. We actually get it in fine against these sixes. The fact that this guy wakes up with ace-queen is pretty inconsequential. But yeah, that's fine. Let's play another game, and let's try and find a larger multiplier if we can. Kind of a gross one. There's not really a lot we can do. As long as we're getting it in okay against that initial raiser, I'm not really fussed about the fact they wake up with ace queen behind us. That's kind of outside of our peripheral vision, right? It's like we're making a decision based on what is actually being presented to us specifically. And against sixes, we end up having the coin flip. That's not to say that we want to be results oriented there either, right? We're not just gonna every time we get it in where it's a coin flip, we're gonna be like, oh, I guess I made the right play. I just think that we've probably selected a decent range to continue in those situations. We've actually selected a decent range to just go for it there. It's kind of interesting that they use the sixes as a min raise. I think for the most part, people are just going to ship that pair. But regardless, I think it's all good. I think this is a really easy shove once this guy limps. If this turns out to be a trap, we'll make a note for next time. But for the most part, when people just limp there, we're almost guaranteed to scoop a 3 big blind pot, which is greater than 10% of a starting stack. So it's really, really quite large. And then here, we're actually going to go ahead and limp. A lot of these blind v blind spots are really awkward to play with weak aces. So I like to limp some of the smaller ones and then call a small raise. They have really poor playability, but we also don't want to min-raise them and be forced to fold where we might have the best hand or might have enough equity to continue. And this has actually proved to work as a pretty nice strategy when we're on the deeper side. Once we get under 19 big blinds effective, we can default to shoving a lot more of those weak aces purely because it's going to do fine as an all-in. Wow, just full pots the flop. Love to see it. You love to see that craziness. And ace 10, just going to go right in the middle, no problem at all. Happy to take down all that dead money every time we do that. Sometimes we can get called by worse too. Ace 10's definitely getting up there. I'm just going to fire up Hold the Manager really quick, guys, and take a look at our results for today so far. I didn't even have it switched on before the session started. There you go. How about that? If it loads up in time, we'll take a look at our profit and loss for the day. I think this will be our last 25 of the session. We like to keep these sort of bite size. I think we've been playing for nearly 30 minutes, which is usually around where we like to cap it. Plenty of interesting spots to talk about, which is what you like to see during these sessions. That ace-8 hand where the guy check jams with the ace in the turn is a really cool one though, because it's really interesting to try and put people on ranges based on their play, and then it's really interesting how a subtle difference in the texture of their hand can make such a huge difference to the way they respond. So if he's telling the truth about having the straight draw and the ace, it completely changes how he plays the ace on the turn, which is kind of why it was an unexpected outcome for us. But that's all part of the process. It's all part of learning how to adjust for different player types, and it's kind of part of what you absorb that makes you a better player in different situations, right? So in the future, if you kind of see somebody taking that line, you can put them on more of that range if you think that's something they're capable of or whatever, or something that they are prone to do. Well, if Hold the Manager will open for me, doesn't look like he wants to. We've been having a couple issues with this one. Might need to reinstall. Okay, let's try that again. King 3 going in the bin for 11 big blinds. Ace King won't be going in the bin though. Definitely going with this hand. Nice, 70% pre. This is for the larger multiplier as well. Very nice. Picking up some chips here in the 3x. All right, so let's go to town. Heads up. Queen of Spades. Never folding this flop. We do manage to make a pair as well. If he just bets full pot, it becomes really messy though, because he could easily just have limped with an ace or something like that. He could even have us beat with the spades. I think once we turn the queen, we can't fold though. Our hand becomes so strong in a spot where he hasn't really represented anything particularly strong pre-flop because he's limped. And on the river, I'm hoping to check, and I hope that he shows me the king of spades. That would be really cool. Nice one. Good call on the turn. Let's take a look at what he had. Take a look at what he had here. He has pocket nines with the 9 of spades, so good call on the turn. Top set feels good. I think this is a pretty easy check behind now. This is not an unbalanced check back as well, because we absolutely will check behind here with a 7 or a deuce sometimes, even some king highs, stuff like that. On the turn, we need to start betting though. We need to build the pot up so we can win a bigger pot at showdown if he does have a small piece. Nice. We seem like we have him in some way, shape, or form here. And because we check behind on the flop now, we can probably go pretty big on the river. Does he want a hero here? No hero. All right. Sorry guys, let me just see if I can get this working for you. What time is it after? Cool, 4 deuce we're not calling with, obviously. right, nice. Limping with queens here. Of course, we're going to trap wherever possible with these pairs once we start to get really shallow. I don't know enough about this player. I'm honestly not sure. I don't really know a lot about this player, and I'm not sure if we want to actually limp call in this situation as opposed to limp shove. I think we're shallow enough, like I was talking about earlier, where the limp call actually is a lot better. Once we get to this flop, we can never fold, of course. We're not folding on the king high flop, but we do want to make some adjustments in these situations for our opponents. If we feel like our opponent is a lot more recreational, we can limp and shove because we know that when they ISO, they're not ever going to fold. So getting it in pre-flop is sometimes better. If we're playing against a player that actually will have some bluffs in this situation, we should be more inclined to flat because we destroy that range harder pre-flop and we can get them to blow up post-flop where they've completely missed. As played, I mean, it works out pretty much the same effective situation. The one thing I wanted to point out about that specific case is in situations where we do flat with hands like pocket queens, even if the board comes ace high, even if the board comes king high, as soon as the stack to pot ratio is 1 or less than 1, in this case he's shoving a little bit under pot, so it's less than 1. We can never give up our hand. We're not playing trappy in order to fold. And if you are playing against better opponents, that's even more important because you know that they will ISO with hands like 3-deuce off and like 6-5 off and some of those really weird unsuited connectors, which is how they balance the times when they are going to min ISO with hands like aces and kings and queens and all that kind of jazz. So when you see them shove on that flop, just because it comes high doesn't mean we're ever giving up. You're always going to pay them if they made their hand. That's fine. As soon as you start to arrive at SPR1, you're going to call off with basically any straight draw, any flush draw, any straight draw that isn't a gut shot, any flush draw, and basically any pair as well, kind of regardless of texture. But yeah, there you go, guys. So after that game was played, let me refresh and give you an update on how we did today. I think that means we ended up playing 5 games. We ended up playing 5 games. We ended up winning 3 of 5. Very high win rate there over a very small sample, of course. Our chip EV overall was, our average chip EV, I should say, 1262 divided by 5. So we were running an average of 252 chips per game. Again, tiny sample, but still a very strong showing, and these are the numbers that you like to look at over a larger sample as well. If you guys have never done that calculation before, remember you take your chips EV adjusted, which you can get from a tracker like Poker Tracker 4 or Hold'em Manager, and you divide it by the total number of games played. I think in Poker Tracker they might actually have a specific stat that you can download, which you can check out on our Discord channel as well. But overall, we ended up winning $75 US. Not too shabby for a very short sesh. So I just wanted to say thank you very much for joining us once again today, guys. If you haven't seen the course before, go and give it a look and see if it's right for you. And consider buying it if it's something that you think is going to be of value to your overall development in poker. If you are interested in playing any kind of hyper format, including heads-up hypers, including three-handed hypers, including even the more recent Grand Tours that have been released on PokerStars, I do think it is really, really excellent, and we've had a lot of good feedback. Don't take my word for it. Like I said, go and check out our Discord channel. Go and ask over there for a second opinion. We've got lots of people who have taken the course and have benefited from it. And, make up your own mind. So until then, guys, hope you guys have good luck on the tables, and I'll see you in the next one.